Washington is full of noise, but here we cut through it. I'm Ryann Hill, your trusted voice on healthcare, aging, and disability policy. On Mic'd Up, I sit down with the people driving change to share their stories, insights, and strategies in the Beltway and beyond. Welcome to Mic'd Up with Ryann Hill. Welcome to Mic'd Up with Ryann Hill, the podcast where policy meets real life. I'm your host, Ryann Hill. I'm the founder and CEO of Indigo Hill Strategies. We're a boutique government affairs firm focused on advancing really critical issues in healthcare, aging, and disability policy. Each episode, we go behind the scenes on federal or state policy, advocacy, and the decisions that are shaping healthcare, aging, disability, and public health in America today. You'll hear conversations with leaders, strategists, change makers, working to move things from ideas into action. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by Fabienne Antoine-Nasser and Melissa Akinlawon from Sickle. Sickle is a patient advocacy organization that's making waves nationally and especially here in DC, representing the sickle cell community. We're going to talk about the mission behind Sickle, the relaunch of the Congressional Sickle Cell Caucus led by Sickle just this year, and why that is such a huge deal for sickle cell policy and advocacy for generations to come. The lobbying and operations work that we've been doing together on Capitol Hill, and a couple other really fun things. So it's a conversation I've been really looking forward to because we do such great work together. So how about we start off with you guys introducing yourselves and talking about what Sickle is, who you serve, and what the organization is built to do.
Awesome. I guess I'll kick it off and then I'll pass it on to Melissa. So like Ryan said, my name is Fabienne Antoine-Nasser. I am the Senior Director of Policy and Government Affairs at Sickle. And just to give a little dose of what Sickle is, and Melissa can back me up here as well. At its heart, Sickle is a national advocacy nonprofit that was built to humanize the sickle cell disease experience. So we serve the sickle cell disease community, patients, their families, and caregivers by fighting for better care, better policies, and better quality of life overall. And Melissa, you can back me up if I missed anything.
You got it all, Fabienne. Thank you for having us, Ryan. My name is Melissa Akinlawon. I'm the Senior Director of Community Programs at Sickle. And like Fabienne shared with you all, yes, our mission is really to focus on the sickle cell disease community. That includes warriors, caregivers, family, friends, clinicians, researchers, and even those that are still learning more about the sickle cell disease landscape and space, because it takes all of our stories to make a change, to create awareness, and then to really just fight for the things that we really need in terms of our access to care. So Sickle is really focused on those stories because we know that it brings a face and a story and a journey and experience in order to drive positive change.
So let me, before we go to the next question, I want to give the audience a sense of how I found Sickle and why this work is so important to me. So sickle cell runs in my family. My eldest brother passed away from complications from sickle cell in 2004, and that's what really sparked my interest in healthcare and health policy. So sickle cell has always been near and dear to my heart from my personal family connection to the issue. We know there are about 100,000, which is a conservative estimate, sickle cell warriors in the country today, over 1 million plus globally. And again, these are conservative estimates. We know that there are a lot more who may not have yet been formally diagnosed or may not be getting the resources to get them onto sort of the data collection that we see in this country. I'm on LinkedIn, as one is often, and I see a post that someone reposted from you guys' fantastic CEO, Ashley Valentine, I think Sickle was having some sort of event. And I said, oh, what is that? That's so cool. So I followed the page, and then maybe like a year or so later, I'm launching Indigo Hill Strategies, and I saw, again, another post from Ashley at Sickle. And I said, you know what, let me just reach out to her and see if they're interested in an outside lobbyist. I was willing to, use my decade plus experience in health policy in DC to help advance the mission of Sickle. And Ashley told me no. And I tell that story all the time because I'm like, okay, I'm still gonna like follow you guys and do whatever because I think the work is so important. 6 months later, we circle back and had a conversation. But I bring that up because I think there's so many ways to get to sort of have organizations be on folks' radar, and Six Cells was put on my radar because I think y'all like the cool stuff that you guys are doing. I think Melissa, you hinted at. I know we're going to talk more about later. But y'all are just doing such cool work, and it's always such a pleasure to be able to engage with you guys and help to amplify the work that you guys are doing. That said, I would love to talk a little bit more about what makes Six Cells the organization that it is, and what drives the work. Because I really want to spend a little minute here because this is what drew me and my team to Six Cells, and I know is what is driving. Folks to give you guys all the attention that you so deserve.
Yes, most definitely. I would say what makes Six Cells different is that, like Melissa said, we are story driven, but also data backed. Mm-hmm. So we believe that while a statistic might tell you how many people have sickle cell disease, you won't necessarily get that story around why they can't get adequate treatment in an ER. So the work is driven by the resilience of our community, quite frankly. And for decades, the sickle cell disease community has been overlooked due to some systemic inequalities and a lack of funding. We can go down the list, but
okay.
we're not gonna stay there. Yeah, we're not gonna stay there because what we're doing is working to circumvent that. So we aren't just asking for more; we're advocating for a better quality of life for those who have sickle cell disease and a true standard of care as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that really drives that work are our robust network of community members. Six Cells is really unique because in addition to the advocacy that we do, the research that we provide, and the resources, our network really is what a lot of our community members have been looking for. It's beyond just the support. It's for truly that storytelling aspect where you can exchange a shared commonality. And with over 450 ambassadors and hundreds of CBO partners, driving the work is an action. It's more than just words. And you see that in our work that's reflected through our programs, the resources that we provide, and really just the amazing ambassadors that really are part of the Six Cells community and family.
So you mentioned over 400, is that right? Over 400 ambassadors?
450 now.
Okay. And I'm assuming they're all over.
And going up.
And they going up, period.
Right, and continuing, yes. They are all over, truly, yes. So we are trying to fill in this interactive map to show where all of our ambassadors are nationally. But as we've been trying to do that, we actually expanded to 9 countries on a global scale. So
I know that's right. That's
when
so
I say
awesome.
like we are truly building a community through our network of ambassadors, it's something that we can, like Fabienne said, we have the data to show for it. And clearly there's a need because while we were focused on just a couple of cities here and there, we have international community members and warriors and caregivers that are like, hey, we really do appreciate the work that Six Cells is doing. The research and the resources are impactful even over here in these particular countries. So that just drives us to keep doing more and providing what our community needs.
Talk about a movement. That's a lot of people. And y'all are managing all of this. I wanted to talk about, so the shift from having over 450 and growing ambassadors to working with hundreds of CBOs, as you mentioned, across the country, taking this to the Hill, right? And like one of the things that we've been so incredibly proud to walk alongside you guys with is the relaunch of the Congressional Sickle Cell Caucus. For those of you who may not be sort of tuned into how caucuses work in Washington, D.C., anybody can start a caucus. Any member of Congress can start a caucus. There are caucuses for any and everything, big and small. You would be surprised, or maybe not, at just how many caucuses exist. The vast majority of caucuses are sort of these smaller entities that they may meet with their members of Congress. They may not. They may have events. They may not. One thing that we were thinking about in the caucus, which I know we're going to get into sort of exactly what it is, just want to give a little bit of background for the audience, is how do we take that momentum that Melissa has talked about, right? This national and global momentum, and use that to really continue to shape policy and advocacy here in Washington, D.C., right? Like we can bring folks to the Hill, which we do a great job, right? Like you guys have an incredibly successful policy forum every March that, is just, it blows my mind how many people are doing these virtual Hill visits, hundreds of people with members of Congress and their staff, and the effects of those conversations for the policy forum and the Hill days are long lasting. Like we still hear about, oh yeah, I did meet with Sickles and we talked about this, and we met with the Warriors, we talked about this. We were thinking about like, how do we make this truly an institution on the Hill? And so we thought about the idea of a congressional caucus. There have been, I think, former iterations of a congressional sickle cell caucus in the past. Sickles is bringing this like new, fresh idea as to like, how do we meet the current moment we're in right now with funding and policies and all the things that are happening sort of both on the Hill and the administration, and create something that can be sort of a built-in congressional champion for the caucus, for sickle cell. So can you guys talk a little bit more about what the Congressional Sickle Cell Caucus is, who the leaders are of the caucus, why it matters, and then also what it actually took to get this caucus relaunched?
Yes, for sure. I'll start it off. So the Congressional Sickle Cell Disease Caucus, like you said, Ryan, it's a formal group of U.S. representatives who are committed to prioritizing sickle cell disease in the halls of Congress. It matters because it provides a permanent home for sickle cell disease policy, and it ensures that when health bills are being drafted, sickle cell disease isn't an afterthought. And as you know, because you were also in the trenches with us, relaunching it was no small feat.
It was no small feat.
No, it was no small feat. And it took months of consistent pressure, strategic pressure, and meetings, finding champions like our co-leads, Representative Glenn Ivey and Representative Rich McCormick, who were willing to lead that change and the charge in Congress. So it required us to show Congress that this isn't just a niche issue, it's a public health priority, and it affects thousands of their constituents across every state line. Yeah.
And I'll also add that, like, the caucus is bipartisan. So, Fabienne, you mentioned Glenn Ivey, a Democrat from Maryland. And then we also have Rich McCormick, who is a Republican physician from Georgia. It was really important for us to make sure that sickle cell was a bipartisan issue, and not something that was solely discussed along party lines, right? Like we have such great champions for sickle cell on both sides of the aisle. And they're even champions for sickle cell in the Trump administration. And so we wanted to leverage all of that to sort of create this dedicated home, as you mentioned, Fabienne. I'll also say, just when I found out, so we got Glenn Ivey, we had been working with his team. We were thinking about, okay, now we need a Republican, right, who is interested in healthcare issues, who maybe serves on a committee of jurisdiction in the halls of Congress so that they can be even more helpful to us. And really is someone who is going places in the party, right? We had the whole like matrix of like who we were thinking about. And when Congressman McCormick said yes, I may or may not have been at a bar and I cried because I was just so happy.
I get it.
Like I was just like, I could not believe that we did this, right? Like it was just such a, if I mean your point about, we worked for months. We worked so hard on like thinking about what could this reimagined caucus look like? What could it do? And we were able to have a really successful caucus launch event back in March. It was the day before you guys' policy forum. And the launch day, that event that we had, it was the day of like a DC tornado that like didn't happen. So, so we had to like leave the lunch on the Hill to go home.
Just chaos. But
whatever. It launched. It's here, and we're so excited. So, and on the caucus, I think, Fabienne, you touched on this a little bit, but it's so important to have this dedicated caucus, right? So that sickle cell policy, sickle cell issues don't get lost in all of the noise that's happening here in DC. I'm wondering if you can touch a little bit more on what does having a dedicated caucus, like what does it open up for the community that wasn't necessarily possible before?
Yeah. I'll start and then I'll kick it off to Melissa, so you guys can tell I'm a talker. But this is just such exciting.
Exciting!
This is such an exciting feat, and
like I cried at a bar.
Yes. This is not. It's not an easy thing to achieve. So I'm just super excited about this work. But I would personally say I believe this timing is critical because, in general, we are sort of in a new era of sickle cell disease care. With gene therapies recently getting approved, conversations on the Hill are kind of shifting from how can we treat this to how do we pay for it and how do we ensure people actually have access to treatment. So that's why it's so important to have that dedicated space to open the doors that were previously closed. And it gives us the platform for briefings to educate people on sickle cell disease because there's still a lapse in education there. But it also allows us to mobilize Dear Colleague letters. It provides a direct line for leadership during budget negotiations, all the things, basically. So this is just such a monumental and just extremely positive opportunity. Yeah.
Bobby, you said something that triggered my memory from when we were planning for this year's policy forum and how we were emphasizing to our community and our ambassadors, like, you are the voice that creates the action. It is not the legislators who, they are driven by your stories, by your experiences in order to make a change. And that's actually the start, where I'll say, of how this caucus is so important, because it is driven by the constituents, by the patients and the clinicians that see this on an everyday basis. So one of the things that's really great about Sickle, and especially the work that we were doing preparing for this year's relaunch and the policy forum, was that we were just simply empowering our audience. Like, you literally have the power to change what is going on when it comes to the funding, the access to care, literally down to the policies over medication and treatments and therapies. So empowering and giving them the tools, the resources, and the space to just share your story, practice, see how it comes across with others. That's what really is the exciting part about this relaunch. And knowing that we're going to have some really strong advocates that serve as storytellers on the Hill, that are going to pull in their own legislators, even back in district, to share their stories, to drive change. Like, I'm so excited about this because it's like a big party that we just kicked off, and we have all these amazing people to join in on the party. So it's going to be an all hands on effort, but it's something that is truly needed. And we know that with this particular community, there's nothing that can stop them. Resistance is not even consideration. So we're really excited about the progress in the future that we see with this caucus.
I've been listening to a lot of Jay-Z lately, as one does. And what's playing in my head right now is the song Legacy from the 444 album, where he says legacy, legacy. Yeah, and like I'm thinking about the legacy, right, of Sickle, you know, of making sure that warriors and their caregivers, and even, you know, to an extent, sort of anybody else in the space, right, people who are doing research, people who are working for, you know, some of these drug companies that are advancing some of these really important treatment options, right? Like, this is creating this legacy so that, like, there will always be a space and an interest. Because sickle cell, a lot of folks don't know, is technically a rare disease, right? And so, like, we've been working really hard over the course of our engagement together to make sure that people remember that when you're talking about rare diseases, sickle cell needs to be in that conversation.
Absolutely.
And we've been doing it, and both of you mentioned sort of, that's going to tee up my next question. We've been doing it from a policy perspective. We're looking at all of the rare disease bills. We're talking, there's a rare disease caucus, of course. We're talking to the rare disease caucus. We're doing all these other things. But we're also, you know, trying to leverage all of those things, the caucus, the rare disease, the warriors showing up for a policy forum and their caregivers, and sort of being that voice to talk about funding and appropriations. Now, a couple of episodes ago, we had my fantastic Vice President of Government Relations, Ebony Slaughter-Johnson, on the podcast to talk about appropriations. I can honestly say, know so little about appropriations. I knew little then, and Ebony tries. She tries to explain it to me. But she's brilliant at appropriations, and it like lights her up. And so I wanted to touch on the funding piece a lot, because I know Ebony, we've been able to do a lot of appropriations work in raising the fact that we still need funding for these programs, that serves sickle cell warriors, caregivers, and CBOs, and sort of using the caucus and just all of those things to raise that awareness. Can you talk a little bit more about what we're advocating for, why it's so important, and especially on the appropriation side? And nothing too technical because Ebony's not here, so I can't.
I know. I'm like, where's my sis Ebony at so she could tee this up, but it's okay. I'll hold it down for now. So yes, appropriations ask. I mean, specifically within the sickle cell disease community, it is vital because sickle cell disease is an ailment that people have from the beginning. So it's something that ages with you. So a lot of people who have sickle cell disease are or need to or require using resources from our government, from their states, from their community in order to get care because it is so expensive. And even as we see some more of these gene therapies coming to play and they're costing millions of dollars, how can a regular person be able to afford such things? I know I can't. And we
I can't
all
even
know
conceptualize like what that number is. Like,
but I mean, it's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And it seems like we all kind of have. I also I have a cousin who has had sickle cell disease, who has had a treatment. So we all know some of the nitty gritty of what that entails. But that is why programs like the Sickle Cell Disease Treatment Demonstration Program from HRSA are so important. There's also the Sickle Cell Disease Newborn Screening Follow-Up Program as well, which is imperative as well. That helps us get those initial numbers and those initial data points that we were losing from the beginning, and to let us know from the jump, from the beginning, if somebody has sickle cell disease, if a baby or a child has sickle cell disease, and if so, making sure that they are on a treatment plan from the beginning so they have a better quality of life. And then as well, the Sickle Cell Data Collection Program that is headed up by the CDC, allowing us to know the data around sickle cell is so important because that data drives funding, and funding, like we said, is necessary. So those programs were specifically at our policy forum. Those were our number associated appropriations ask. And thankfully, like you said, Ryan, it's a toss up in the healthcare space, but with the sickle cell disease space, we were able to maintain funding. So we were asking for those funding levels to be maintained because we know that things can change, and we were grateful and excited to know that in February we were able to consistently have those funding levels stay, because it's a gamble. We don't know, but I would say that it's with the work with our advocates and with you all, I think we all coming together. I think we can give ourselves a pat on the back for that, because I think that was our work that helped to make sure that funding was maintained, and our continued advocacy will make it continue to get maintained for FY27.
And I will also say that like we worked so hard on that HRSA reauth language that made it into the government funding bill back in I think it was late January. I barely know what day it is now. At some point in Q1, we worked really hard on advocating for that. And I think it's important to note for people, who may have listened to that episode with Ebony, you can always ask for more. You can also ask for level, right? Like you can ask just like, keep it where it is. We don't need you to touch it. We would love more money, right? If you want to give us more, we're not going to turn that down. There's use for more. But sometimes when you're thinking about protecting programs and making sure that programs are not eliminated, asking for just level is often the best that you can get. And so we were just thrilled that we were able to get level. We were able to just maintain these things, because there was a time last year where we didn't know if these programs were going to exist, period. Right. And so like, it's such it's so great to know that like, okay, they exist now. And they're here. We would love more. We would love more if you have it, but always. We recognize that you don't have it. So we'll sort of take, what we can get. I want to ask a question. And I think Melissa, maybe you'll have some insight here, but when we talk about, as Fabienne talks about these programs, right? Like what does it actually mean for warriors and their families when sickle cell does not get the resources that it needs?
That's a great question, Ryan. And it's often something that we think about as a team as we're doing the work. What I can say that I know and I can share from the warriors that have shared that experience amongst our community, it does impede daily life and access to a lot more than just the care, but everything from transportation to work to family life balance. And it's one of those things that I think is often not thought of when you think about, okay, if someone can't get their treatment or their care, what does the sickle cell crisis look like? How long does that hospitalization or that emergency scenario really consist of that could literally impede every single aspect of their life? So pulling in that experience is something that is very unique, but also important to all of this funding, all of this work that we're asking and pushing for. I love that one of the things that our warriors and our ambassadors are really not afraid to do is share the nitty gritty of what sickle cell disease looks like. And that's needed in order to know what we need to continue doing on our end and with other CBOs, with our legislators, with the industry and pharma as well, to continue pushing for their quality of life and the care and the resources that they truly need. And when I say the nitty gritty, we get some of the nitty gritty stories, but it's needed. It's truly needed. So it's one of the things I truly appreciate. I'm not going to say necessarily love it, but I appreciate the genuine, the transparency, because it lets you know the importance of what we're pushing for.
Absolutely. Okay, so my last question for you guys before we get to an outro of the podcast is, where are you guys headed? Where is Sickle Cell's headed? And how can the listeners / viewers of Mic'd Up with Ryann Hill get involved or learn more beyond just like stalking Ashley Valentine on LinkedIn like I did?
Which was very effective. So we're here today. It worked. I believe, and I'm very excited about this, as somebody who's recently new to Sickle Cells, we are heading toward a future where we don't just react to policy, but I want to see us shaping it before it's even written. And that's something I'm so passionate and excited about with heading up our government affairs team and our work. And just really being that voice and being able to translate those patient voices, those caregiver voices, those physician voices into actionable policy is something that I'm so excited about. And taking that aggressive approach, like I said, where we're not just reacting, we are charging the course. We are building that policy that everybody else will then, follow. And, legislators, they will see us as that resource as well. And that's where we're headed. That's where I already see the trajectory that it's going. And I'm excited to continue charging that course.
Absolutely. Melissa, anything to add?
Absolutely. But from a community programs perspective, we are really excited that we're about to start tapping into some stories from unique audience members that probably haven't been considered before in the sickle cell disease space and community. So don't want to share too much yet because we want you all to follow along the journey and see what we're up to. But I think it's going to be a really great addition to not only, as I keep mentioning, this robust and awesome network of ambassadors, but truly folding into the policy and government affairs work that Fabienne and her team are leading. So one of the things that's always important is always keeping stories fresh, always bringing a new perspective and a new light. Because this is a rare disease and there are rare attributes and components and factors to it that really do impact our work, as well as that of a warrior, caregiver, family member, clinician, researcher, you name it. So we are headed down some really fun paths in order to continue bringing that story to the forefront. But most importantly, like we said, we want your viewers and listeners to follow along with our journey. So our website is probably the best place to get started, but we are across multiple social media platforms that will actually help us with amplifying those stories that we're telling in different ways. So we're really excited about that. But most importantly, we have events all the time. Webinars, in-person events, such as our policy forum is virtual, but we also have a therapeutics and coverage summit in the fall. So there are plenty of ways to get involved. There are plenty of ways to keep up with us, as well as our CBO partners. So we're really looking forward to that.
I'm so excited. And what you're hinting at, I don't even know what it is. So I'm going to find out with everybody else. I'm
Breaking
so
news for
excited about it.
everybody.
I'm
Yes.
so excited about it. All right, ladies, fab as always. We're going to round out the podcast now. So thank y'all so much for tuning in to Mic'd Up with Ryann Hill. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, share with a colleague, and leave a review so people can join the conversation and continue to follow along. A super special shout out to Rex Wallace Consulting for their generous sponsorship of the podcast. To learn more about our work at Indigo Hill Strategies, visit indigohillstrategies.com and follow along for more insights on the policies that are shaping our communities. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.
We all know quality isn't optional. Success in Medicare Advantage and Medicaid demands relentless focus, using data, engaging providers, elevating member experience, and embedding quality in your culture. At RWC, quality is our DNA. Our clients outperform the industry, and our Net Promoter Score of 94 says it all. Whether you're aiming for 4 stars or exceeding Medicaid benchmarks, redefining success in Medicare and Medicaid begins with RWC, because we catalyze cultures of quality.